up, guys? In this video, we're going to talk about aiming and crosshair placement. We're going to cover crosshair placement itself in the game. We're going to talk about flicking and the different mouse movements. And then we're going to talk about your range of control between your arm and your wrist. So I'm going to jump straight in game and start talking about crosshair placement first. A lot of times people ask me about aim, and they always want to know, like, how do I hit more shots? Well, the first aspect of hitting more shots is actually being able to put your crosshair on the enemy. So the first thing I want to talk about is crosshair placement and being logical. What I mean by being logical is if you're going to come around any corridor, you always want to assume and know the map, where is the other guy going to be? Let's be logical. If I come out as a terrorist and peek long A, there's probably a CT either there or there, because these are the two positions where they could take cover, right? So if you don't know where to look and you don't know where an enemy might be, let's be logical. That's the first step. You want to make sure you're just looking where the enemy could be. Next thing is knowing the depth. How high or lower are you aiming with your crosshair? Now, if there's if you want to aim for a headshot right here, that's fine. A guy might be walking into the door. But when you peek long A, you don't want to come out this high with your crosshair, because if they're ducking, they could obviously be below your crosshair, and that split second of adjustment could mean the difference in the damage you do and the kill. So make sure not only are you aware of the logical things to peek, but now crosshair height. Alright, guys? So when you come around any corridor, make sure you're doing crosshair height. Kind of checks in your mind. Anywhere you're going, right? You might peek catwalk and take a headshot here, and now you have to lower it for this, right? Come up to goose. You don't want to stay this high for the goose right there. That's the goose peak. We call that corridor. So you don't want to be up here just because you're peeking here. Well, actually, this kind of works out nice because it's kind of head level here is mid-body level. And whenever the farther they are away, guys, you generally want to aim more mid-level body. You don't want to be aiming way up here for some guy back there. If he does happen to be standing up, sure, you can snap up. It's a lot easier to snap up than down for whatever reason with your hand. Now, we're going to talk more about that in the drill after this, but the next thing I want to talk about is pre-aiming too hard. It's always good to pre-aim and like kind of look towards the next area, but I have a common problem where obviously guys could be holding this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, right? All four of these lines are pretty common angles, right? We're going to talk more about positioning in the angles next video. But right now I want you guys to realize, don't always just come around the corner this early, because there could be a guy standing here. It might be obvious for a lot of you guys, but I want to make sure the people that are newer to the game aren't just coming around peeking like this when there could be a guy here. Make sure when you're coming up a spot like catwalk, you're clearing angles that you can without peeking all of them at once. You don't want to just run like this and peek everything at the same time. You want to peek this one, then that one, maybe then that one, and then jiggle peeking is something we'll talk more about. But jiggle peeking is basically just showing your body and then coming back to the peak so that they maybe take a shot and mess up their recoil pattern, right? But anyways, you do want to take angle by angle, guys, when you're working on your aim. So crosshair placement is all about logical aiming and then not pre-aiming too hard, all right? Next up I want to talk about is flicking, alright guys? So anytime you're thinking about aim, you're thinking about how do I just get better aim? Well, obviously deathmatch and all those things are drills we're going to talk about in the course, but better aim in general is two things. It's you being able to just steadily put your cursor on someone, and then also being able to snap over to someone who's not near your crosshair, right? So, flicking, and the reason that flicking is good is because you're going to have two mechanisms, and that's the third part of this. Two mechanisms when you're aiming. You have your arm, which is good for the big movements, and your wrist, which is good for the small movements, crosshair adjustment, recoil control. So when you're aiming with your arm, you want to be aware to practice your flicks. You want to be able to realize that your arm is going to be doing the bigger movements, and your wrist is going to be correcting the small ones. So this is my range of control from here to here with my wrist. That's where I could have my arm planted and just snap to somebody with only my hand. Now what you need to realize is when you're flicking, guys, it's not just one big perfect movement. You watch people like Shroud or any top aimer, and you think, even myself, right, you think about that everything was one smooth movement, and it looks like that because they've practiced what I'm about to show you so much. Basically what you're doing with a flick is you're throwing your arm from your elbow and then you're correcting with your wrist. So say when I flick, my flick is here, my wrist corrects. So while it looks fast, right, to some people, you snap onto the head. A lot of times when I have an opponent, I even get that next level of accuracy because it really dials me in for the kill. But say I'm shooting someone right here, and there's a head right there, and I snap over. See how my first movement was a little off him, but I corrected it? So you need to understand flicking, you're not going for absolute perfection on the first movement. You're breaking it down into two things, your big arm movement and your wrist movement. The way you practice using this is in deathmatch, just whenever you see a target, don't look at them and swipe away, swipe back, and go for that kill. Alright guys, the last thing I want to mention is what I already touched on, which is range of control, your arm versus your wrist. Your arm is a bigger mechanism. It's harder to control. The lower the sensitivity, the more of your arm you're using. The higher the sensitivity, the more of your wrist you're using, right? So whatever your sensitivity may be, realize this fact and realize that the more you're using your wrist for the finer moments, like if a guy's here and you want to snap up here, the more you can use your hand for that, the more precise you're going to be with your movement. Realize your arm is great for adjusting. I use about a 1.95 sensitivity, 1.85, somewhere in here, with 400 DPI. A lot of times, if I'm shooting here, I need to snap to window. This is my wrist. My wrist ends there. So I use my arm to help snap me over, and then my wrist to precisely point where I want. And my arm is here, but my headshot needs to go up there. So realize the difference of those three things, guys. Crosshair placement, being logical, knowing depth of field, so that when you're peeking, you're not peeking too high, right? Obviously, I'm looking for a headshot right here, but when I go to spawn, make sure you're adjusting your crosshair. The hardest to remember is on the same plane, like at long A. You're aiming high right here for headshot, drop your crosshair a little and aim lower for the corner. And last but not least, understanding flicks and range of control. If I moved a little too fast through that, guys, don't worry. Follow the activity right after this, and we're going to talk about more aim tips and tricks.